Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. And Dave, Brandon Bean, he was too busy this weekend at the Kentucky Derby, and he let us down because this is the first Monday in a long time where legitimately no Buffalo Bills news has dropped for us to discuss. So unless we want to become the Air Raid TMZ Hour and talk about some other things in the Bills Mafia sphere, it seems like our attention is going to turn this evening to the Buffalo Bills opponents in the AFC East. And the goal of the show tonight is to sort of compare the Buffalo Bills to the New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, and the New England Patriots. So just taking a quick look around the AFC East as we get rolling tonight. The Jets have obviously brought in Aaron Rodgers. That was their big swing of the offseason. The Miami Dolphins brought in Jalen Ramsey. That was their big swing of the offseason. And then you have the New England Patriots, whose big swing this offseason was hiring a competent and qualified offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien, replacing whatever the heck it was they did last year with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. So just to get things kicked off between you, the people in the comment section, let us know your thoughts as well. On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about the Buffalo Bills losing their AFC East title in 2023?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably like a 5, maybe. And 5 to me is pretty low, I would think. All things considered, you think about, the jump that the AFC East teams made from 2021 to 2022. The division was more competitive. Obviously, Miami was in the playoffs. You look at how those teams improved year on year from 21 to 22. Just looking at kind of DVOA statistics, Miami was 25th in 2021, jumped all the way up to 8th in 2022. New England, was 15th in DVOA last year. And the Jets, the Jets moved up, although they were only 16th, they moved up from 26th. So all three teams really were in the mix last year to be competitive. And now, as you mentioned, some big swings from the Jets bringing in Aaron Rodgers. We know Miami is hopeful to have Tua back and healthy with those weapons they have and looking to continue to be a playoff team. And the Patriots, with a competent offensive coordinator, maybe getting the best out of Mac Jones. We'll see. This division is still the Bills, and the Bills are still going to be the favorite. But it, again, would be naive to say that you can't look at some of these moves that these teams have made and not think that it's going to be a pretty competitive landscape in this division this year. And one of the things I was thinking about this division was you remember last year when there was all that talk of the AFC West, right? In the Broncos bringing in Russell Wilson and obviously McDaniels with the Raiders. And it's I was kind of comparing the AFCs this year, maybe to the AFC West of last year. You had the Broncos who brought in Russell Wilson. I kind of look at them kind of like the Jets, right? The Jets bringing in Aaron Rodgers, defensive, good defense to go along with that. Some good weapons on offense. That's kind of like the Jets and the Broncos kind of run parallel to me. You've got Miami, kind of I look at as kind of like the Chargers, right? The high draft pick quarterback, the kind of up and coming coordinator turned coach, with weapons on the offense on both of those teams. And then you kind of have the Patriots West, right? With Josh McDaniels and Jimmy G leading the helm in Vegas. And they're kind of like the Patriots, maybe the worst team in the division. We'll see. And then the Bills are kind of like the Chiefs of the division. So that's kind of like some of the comparisons I was making and ultimately landing on this could be a really good division in 2023.
Yeah, I'm with RJ Melva, who said he was at a 6 or a 7. I think I'll give the moves that teams have in this division have made that respect. But you're right. The Buffalo Bills are the top dogs in the AFC East until someone dethrones them. If the Buffalo Bills can stay healthier this year, you can make the argument they would have had a better record in this same division last year had they been healthier. And at the end of the day, I love turning on ESPN. I love getting on Twitter, and I love seeing all of these national media people pumping up the Jets, pumping up the Dolphins, saying the Buffalo Bills' time as AFC East champs is over, because it sort of reminds me of what the Kansas City Chiefs had to deal with last offseason. So I think the Buffalo Bills have that. We haven't really done what we wanted to do as the front runner. So now maybe taking that back seat in terms of the limelight to the Jets and the Dolphins, maybe that is just what the Buffalo Bills need. But that's just the fan in me, I think.
Well,
Hoping for the best there.
Well, but I mean, the funny thing, and I really like that comparison, right? Because the Chiefs were still the favorite to win their division last year,
Yeah.
but they weren't being quite talked about as much as they were in years prior. And like, not necessarily people writing them off, but like kind of saying, like, oh, well, it's going to be a lot tougher road for them, even though they were still the favorites. And it's kind of like the Bills now, right? You still have your factions that are like obviously very pro Bills, and the fans and mafia are obviously still very pro Bills, but like, the fact of the matter is I think this team has a chance to perform better when at least the external pressure, and again, we don't know how it's handled inside the building, but at least from the outside looking in, I feel like this team tends to handle things better when there's a chip on their shoulder and they have really something really in their kind of back pocket that makes them feel like disrespected, quote unquote, right? But we don't know, right? I'm sure that inside the building, it's probably business as usual. But as a fan, I think like just going through the drought and going through everything we've gone through as fans, losing the Super Bowls, et cetera, we as fans also kind of feel like we like it better when there's a chip on our shoulder as well. So I just think that's the case this time around as well.
All right, let's start off the show tonight by taking a look at the draft classes of these three franchises in the AFC East, the three teams trying their best to dethrone the Buffalo Bills as champions of the AFC East. And let's start with the New York Jets. The New York Jets made an interesting selection. I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers may or may not have traded right in front of them for a reason to sort of take Broderick Jones right out from under their nose there. So they're going to be rolling out Mekhi Becton and Dwayne Brown at tackle again this season, because in the first round, the New York Jets selected Will McDonald. In the second round, they got Joe Tippmann, who was a Bills Mafia favorite, a Mitch Morse type of center prospect. Then they had to wait all the way to the fourth round where they got Carter Warren, a guy who was one of my guys in this year's draft. I think he is a day one swing tackle in the National Football League. They got quick riser running back Israeli Banaconda in the fifth round, sort of that zone read type of running back that the Kyle Shanahan system seemed to adore. Then they added Zaire Barnes, the outside linebacker, Jarek Bernard Converse, the corner, and Zach Kuntz, who made it all the way to the seventh round late in the draft. What are your thoughts on the New York Jets draft class in totality?
I like their draft class, and I think this is now the second year in a row that I've said that and felt like they've done a really good job drafting. I mean, like, yes, maybe they did want to draft Broderick Jones, but they still get Will McDonald. You pair Will McDonald, with the pass rushers they already had, with the pass rushers they already had in John Franklin Myers, Carl Lawson. But you have to remember, they drafted Jermaine Johnson in the first round last year, and now they add Will McDonald, another first-round pass rusher. So the Jets are really kind of taking that 49ers approach to no surprise with Robert Saleh and investing heavily in the defensive line early in drafts. And like they have quite the rotation now, right? Between Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson, JFM, Carl Lawson, not to mention they beefed up the interior as well with Al Wood. So that defensive front with Simon Thomas too, Quentin Williams, Quentin Jefferson, like they have a very nice looking front seven. So like and as Pete says, like I liked Will McDonald going in to the pre-draft process. Did I think it was a little earlier than I thought he would get drafted? Sure. But I definitely thought that he was very much more than capable of being a first round pick, and thought he could be a first round pick, and he was. And I think him playing at a position in Iowa State, playing in that sort of 3-3-5 or 3-4, edge role, like was not really to his strengths. I think he's going to be in a much better fit playing as more of a 4-3 traditional edge in Robert Saleh's defense. And I think he's going to be a factor. And so I love that pick. Joe Tippmann, they needed help at center, right? They had McGovern there. And like really, if you look at the interior now, it's pretty short up for the Jets with Tippmann, Laken Tomlinson, and Vera Tucker. That interior looks pretty good. Mekhi Becton, we'll see what comes back. Dwayne Brown's really only been a left tackle in his career. So is Mekhi going to slide over to the right? He made that comment on social media about how he's a left tackle. They have Max Mitchell. You mentioned they drafted Carter Warren. So they have options now on that offensive line. So, and then you mentioned some of the other picks, Kuntz being a late one as well that we liked. So like I was a pretty big fan of the Jets draft class. The middle rounds were like, okay. But like, overall, I thought they did a pretty good job in kind of letting the board fall to them. It wasn't like they're A+++ from last year, right? Where it was 3 first-rounder studs, but they still had a good draft, I thought.
Yeah, it's the Will McDonald pick was surprising, I think, just because of the age, being the older prospect, 25 years old. So him going sort of in the top 15 was a little bit of a shocker because of that. But we're going to get to this later on the show. It's not exactly like the Jets needed an edge rusher, but as you said, that San Francisco 49ers philosophy, they're going to make Josh Allen's life a living heck now with all the dudes that they have who can rush the passer at edge rusher. And we're going to get to that later on the show. And then literally all the guys that they have in the secondary on top of that. The Jets, other than the linebacker position, which we'll talk about too, as the show rolls around, they now have a really, really deep and a really, really talented defense. And the number one way to beat the Buffalo Bills is to make Josh Allen's life a living hell. Joe Tippmann, I think, could easily be a day one starter for them at center. He's obviously going to have to beat out Connor McGovern for that. Carter Warren is there as a fail-safe in case Dwayne Brown or Mekhi Becton get hurt. Both of them have a history of injuries, at least lately. And then they have Abanikanda now, too, in case Breece Hall struggles to come back. So not even looking sort of at their later round picks. I really like what the Jets did because I think it really pushes them further into that sort of all-in mentality that they have this year with Aaron Rodgers, because the guy's 40 years old. So their window is really only 1 or 2 years unless they can somehow magically get their hands on a quarterback again next offseason. Looking now at the Patriots draft, they traded back in the first round. They still got in my opinion, a blue chip prospect in DB Christian Gonzalez. Then they added Deion White in the second round, Martin Mapu in the third round, Jake Andrews, the center, in the fourth round. They drafted not one, but 2 specialists in this draft. Chad Ryland, the kicker out of Maryland, in the fourth. Sidney Sau, the guard out of Eastern Michigan, in the fourth. Antonio Mafi, the guard from UCLA, in the fifth. Keishawn Butte, the wide receiver out of LSU, in the sixth. Bryce Behringer, the punter, the second of the 2 specialists out of Michigan State, in the sixth. Demario Douglas, the wide receiver, in the sixth. And then 2 cornerbacks, Amir Speed in the sixth and Isaiah Bolden in the sixth. A lot of draft picks here for the New England Patriots. What stood out to you, and what are your thoughts on their draft class as a whole?
Well, obviously they had a ton of picks, right? And to me, what stood out were the first 2 picks in Christian Gonzalez and Keon White. I thought they appear, at least on paper, and we'll see what happens as things play out. But I felt like they got really good value with those 2 picks when they got them. I thought Christian Gonzalez could have been a top 6-7 pick in this draft. I thought the Lions maybe could have taken him at the 6th pick. He falls, and the Patriots get to add another really, really stud corner to that group, which, looks like a perfect fit for them. Obviously, the Patriots are one of the better pass defenses already in the NFL, and now add Christian Gonzalez to that. And then obviously adding Keon White to a defensive front that already consisted of high draft picks like Christian Barmore. And they, obviously they have Judon and others on that offensive line already. Like, I think their first 2 picks were really solid, like safe picks, good value. The rest of the class, we know Marte Mapu had the visit with the Bills, so we're pretty familiar with him, but drafting 2 specialists, like, it felt kind of to me like they were just like, oh, we have so many picks, like, let's just pick these 2. Like, it felt as the draft went on that it was just more about like, let's just take some guys and see how they play out. I'm not really all that impressed with their overall haul when you start thinking about how many picks they had and the kind of positions that they then address, like drafting 2 more corners late, like and 2 specialists, like not exactly how I would have done it.
Mhm.
And look, Bill Belichick's drafts have obviously, come with some scrutiny, at least from my perspective, over the past several years. Like he hasn't drafted that well over the past several years. Although I thought the first 2 picks were solid and good value, I thought the rest of the picks were not all that impressive, and we'll see how it plays out. But overall, like I'm glad they kind of, at least in my mind, whiffed, so to speak,
Yeah.
on the rest of the picks because they had so
Uh,
many. After the first 2, I thought were pretty good.
Yeah, and Christian Gonzalez is the big scary one. Keon White, if he develops, like he's just such a New England type of defensive lineman, as you mentioned. Mapu is interesting simply for the fact that like the Patriots seem to be collecting these types, like Marty
They drafted
Mapu,
Duggar
Kyle
already. Like,
Duggar,
yeah.
Jabril Peppers.
Yeah.
Like they have so many dudes who are just all the same. These like hybrid like safety linebacker types. It's very weird. They have such a collection of them. So the fact that they used their 3rd round pick on like a Josh Allen spy, like that, I think that goes to show you, like last year, they were drafting all these speedy corners because Josh Allen was in their head over what Isaiah McKenzie did to them. Now Josh Allen, maybe the runner, has them drafted more of these sort of like star type of players, these like these thick dime type of players in guys like Marty Mapu. And then like their offensive line, the depth was awful. So they recalibrated the depth of their offensive line. Andrews, Sal, Mafi, don't mind those. With Juju Smith-Schuster in the fold, he's a slot corner. So Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas, that's interesting because both of those guys are sort of projected in the slot. I guess Boutte can maybe work on the outside a little bit. And then obviously, if they have 2 rookies at kicker and punter, I will be very, very happy because if those games come down to special teams, I think the Buffalo Bills will be at the advantage. So yeah, a very, very odd draft from the New England Patriots, but those top 2 picks, top 3 picks, really, in my opinion, pretty solid as you stated as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Miami Dolphins with a whopping 4 picks in this draft. I think my favorite was the media grilled them after the draft because fans of the team saw their biggest needs as offensive line and tight end. And what did the Miami Dolphins really not address in any real tangible way? Offensive line or tight end. And then Chris Greer came out and said, yeah, what the fans see as our biggest needs, we're not too concerned about it, but we're not worried about it at all, which I thought was an odd thing for Chris Greer to say, because that could blow up in his face. They did draft like a wide receiver tight end hybrid, and they did add an offensive lineman late, but with only 4 picks, they decided to take Cam Smith, who I think can immediately start for them nickel. He can play safety, and he sort of has those physical intangibles that a year from now they can boot Xavier Howard out and have Cam Smith take over that CB2 role next to Jalen Ramsey. But the only reason they had to do it is because they failed so miserably drafting Noah Igbenogany, and he was an absolute bust who's probably not going to be on the team next year. Then they went for the luxury in the 3rd round and took Devon A-Chain, the speedy running back, which it's scary to think about him in that Mike McDaniel offense. It's scary to think about them adding more speed. But again, some of these other holes like tight end, offensive line, not filled. They took a wide receiver tight end hybrid in Elijah Higgins when they already have one in Tanner Connor on their roster. And then they took an offensive lineman that I liked late, a tackle, guard, flex, a guy who will give them some nice depth early on in Ryan Hayes out of Michigan, who I thought went maybe a little later than I thought in this draft class. So what are your thoughts on the Dolphins draft class? Because not a lot of meat to that bone.
Not on meat. I mean, obviously only 4 picks, the forfeited pick. I think I liked I think they got good value in the pick where they got Cam Smith. I thought he was going to go a bit earlier. I thought there was a chance that maybe he could have snuck in to the very, very late stages of the 1st round. But that also seemed like kind of a luxury pick to me. Like you traded for Jalen Ramsey, you still have Xavier Howard. Now I know Xavier Howard has gone through his ups and downs, but you still have him, right? And so is this a situation where Cam Smith's gonna play nickel, like you mentioned? Like we'll see. It seems like if they feel like he can, that's a good option for them with, putting him in the nickel and having Howard and Ramsey on the outside. If he plays a little safety, we'll see. We know they have Javon Holland from the back end. So is Brandon Jones replaceable maybe at the strong safety position? I don't know, right? Like it just seemed like a a bit of a weird pick to me. I do like Hayes as well, but again, like he's not the type that's probably going to come in and push any of the, incumbents, even though that line isn't necessarily the strongest. I don't see a guy like Ryan Hayes necessarily pushing any of the incumbents. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. 4 picks, it's, felt like they maybe needed to be a bit more selective, but maybe they just said, look, with only 4 picks, we're just going to take the guys we like the best and not worry so much about immediate contributions in 2023. We'll kind of come back to this in 2024. So, I mean, I'm not mad about it. I like A-Chain as a running back, but they have Mostert still, and they have Wilson. So it's like, what's his role going to be? We know that style offense, they like to use 2-3 running backs. So he probably have a role in year 1. And it is scary to think that what he could do. But overall, if you're a Bills fan looking at this Miami draft class, you're probably not losing a ton of sleep over it.
Yeah. So today we are going to get into breaking down, just like we have been, the AFC East. And we're going to go position group by position group, and we're going to sort of rank them, compare them to the Buffalo Bills. And then at the end, we're going to talk about who is the biggest threat to the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East. But first, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, so the Buffalo Bills, their biggest competition in the AFC this year is their 3 divisional foes. You got to get through them first. Your goal is to go 6-0 in the division every year. We got New England, we got Miami, we got the Jets. The biggest hump for the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs would be the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. That's who we're going to talk about next week. But again, our concern this week is going to be the AFC, and we're going to start with the most important position on the field, and that is the quarterback position. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen. The New York Jets are all in with 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers. The Miami Dolphins are rolling back Tua for another season, but have sort of given themselves maybe a sturdier backup this offseason with the addition of Mike White. And the New England Patriots are, despite the fact that Bill Belichick has made it completely clear through the media that he does not like Mac Jones, he is running it back again with Mac Jones and possibly Bailey Zappi. So what are your thoughts on the quarterbacks of the AFC East before we get started ranking them 1 to 4?
I mean, I think a lot has been made about the Jets trade for Aaron Rodgers, obviously. I mean, it's a huge move. He goes into this situation with a guy he's familiar with, and Alan Lazard, who signed there. He's got really up-and-coming, talented, looking like maybe a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL in his future in Garrett Wilson, if he gets the right quarterback playing with him. And then obviously they have other complementary pieces like Tyler Conklin, and the running backs, Brees, and if he comes back, and the running backs that they drafted. The offensive line, still a question. I don't know if it's as good of an offensive line as he had in Green Bay, but I do think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be coming into the season with a little something to prove after a down 2022. And I actually am probably going to give him a little more respect than maybe others want to, but I expect Aaron Rodgers to play really well for the Jets this year. Now, I'm not saying he's better than Josh Allen. I think in his career overall, you'd say he's ahead because he's older, but this year wouldn't put him ahead of Josh Allen necessarily.
Yeah, looking at Aaron Rodgers, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, he seems like he's bought in, at least early on, to being the New York quarterback, doing those things like going to.
I forgot to mention Mecole Hardman too. I forgot that one. So
and hockey games as well. There's plenty of talent on that New York Jets offense as well. The things that I would be concerned about if I was a Jets fan, and the things that as a Bills fan, I'm hoping, manifest themselves is, number one, he wasn't very good last year. Like, he wasn't in Green Bay. You can blame his supporting cast all you want. He also was not very good. He got banged up as well over the course of the season. So even though he looked good in shorts. He looked good in those slow-mo videos, better than Tua in those slow-mo videos last year for the Dolphins. There was actually a spiral on this one when he was throwing it for the Jets. The regular season, you start taking those hits. What's going to happen? And I really love the fact that the New York Jets are sort of bending the knee to Aaron Rodgers, and they're doing things to cater to him, like signing Randall Cobb, who's not a competent NFL player anymore. They're probably going to sign Mercedes Lewis as well. Like, they had a young, talented core of like really good skill position players, and they've weeded some of those guys out. Braxton Berrios, Elijah Moore. They've weeded some of those guys out to cater to Aaron Rodgers, bringing in the likes of Randall Cobb. And I think by the time all is said and done, they'll also have added Mercedes Lewis as well. So that's the one thing I'm going to bank on, is the fact that they are seemingly bringing in like lesser talented players to sort of take snaps away from talented players because they're buddies with Aaron Rodgers. So definitely that is a positive if you're a Bills fan to look at. That could blow up in their face if they're the New York Jets. The Dolphins are the Dolphins. Like, if Tua is healthy, he fits into that system. They're a scary team. They've got a lot of speed, but can you really trust him to play multiple games? And then I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit here, because I think that Mac Jones, he's clearly the fourth best quarterback in the AFC East. I'm not going to sit here and debate that, but I think he gets a bad rap. And I think that so many people have their heads so far up Bill Belichick's ass that they're not willing to see it. Everyone wanted to blame Mac Jones for the problems last year, and Bill Belichick has made it his mission. And make no mistake about it, Bill Belichick controls everything that goes on in Foxborough. Anything that leaks out of that building is leaked by Bill Belichick or leaked with his permission. And all of these stories coming out that like Mac Jones wasn't emotionally mature, he wasn't listening to coaches, all these things that have been leaked by Bill Belichick to sort of illustrate his disdain for Mac Jones, or to try to get somebody to pick up the phone and come trade for him. Absolutely ridiculous. I give Mac Jones credit for the way he performed last year. He literally had an incompetent NFL offensive coordinator, somebody who wasn't qualified to call offensive plays for a JV football high school team. And like, we saw it manifest sort of in that Patriots game in Foxborough. Mac Jones got frustrated because the game plan was literally just keep dumping the ball off. The Bills are bad at tackling. Eventually we'll break a big one. That was their game plan. That was their magic game plan in New England. So kudos to Mac Jones for saying, like, this is unacceptable. This is the year 2023. We need to take some shots down the field. We need to be more potent on offense. We can't just dink and dunk and run the ball like it's 1984. So kudos to Mac Jones. I give him credit. I can't give him credit enough to make him any higher than the fourth best quarterback in the AFC East, because there's a lot of talented quarterbacks here. But how would you rank them 1 to 4 in the AFC East?
Oh, man. I mean, Mac Jones is clearly fourth, and I think Josh Allen is clearly first. And then I think whether you want to put Rodgers or Tua ahead is kind of comes down to how you perceive the player. Are you ranking someone based on purely what you think they're going to be in 2023, pending health? Are you ranking them based a little bit on past production? Right. I mean, obviously, overall, Rodgers had the better career, but Tua may be the better quarterback if healthy right now in 2023. I will say, right, because there are still a little bit of question about maybe, what Tua's health is going to be like. I know by right now he's coming back and all that. I'm going to give the edge to Aaron Rodgers right now over Tua, just because, like, I feel like with the weapons Rodgers has, I think that he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. I think we saw some of Tua's ceiling last year with when he was healthy with Tyreek and Waddle, and it was a very good ceiling. But I think Rodgers still might have 1 year of magic left in him. I could be dead wrong on this, but I guess for this year, I'm going to go Allen, Rodgers, Tua, Mac Jones.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna go with that same exact order. So we're sort of in agreement here. We sort of have a consensus. And one of the things that I'm gonna do, and we don't have to stick to this to a T, but as we go through the show here tonight, after every position group, I'm gonna give each team points. Like right now,
Nice.
The Bills have 4 points, the Jets have 3 points, the Dolphins have 2 points, and the New England Patriots have 1 point. We're gonna see sort of at the end of this experiment, as we go through each position group and we talk about the coaching staffs, what the score is for each
I
of
like
these
that.
teams and sort of what these teams look like on paper. And it's not an exact science because in reality, Josh Allen's like 10, right? He's like 10 points. Aaron Rodgers is like 5 points. Tua is like 4. Like I think there's that big of a gap when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen at your disposal. And he's what's ultimately making the Buffalo Bills the best team in the AFC East. But it'll be interesting to see sort of how these scores shake out by the time we get done with this. So on to running backs now. The Buffalo Bills, we talked about last week. We broke down the position group. They've got James Cook, who might now be the bell cow. You have Damian Harris. You have Latavius Murray, and you have Nyheim Hines. Going against those guys, the other running back rooms in the AFC East. For the Jets, you have Breece Hall coming off the torn ACL to go along with Michael Carter, Israeli Banaconda, and Bam Knight. The Miami Dolphins have Mostert and Wilson returning from last season, and they've also added Devin Achane. And the New England Patriots have Ramondre Stevenson. They added James Robinson. And, Bill Belichick, he doesn't like to play those rookies right away. I think Pierre Strong Jr. might have a role there for the New England Patriots this year in some semblance, some way, shape, or form in the backfield. And you could probably throw Ty Montgomery in there as well as a receiving back. So what are your thoughts on the running back rooms of the AFC East? What sticks out to you the most?
Well, I mean, there's two things to me that stick out the most, right? Number one is the Bills kind of making over this room in like a year and a half, right? Like, obviously, the trade of Zach Moss, bringing in Nyheim Hines, bringing in former Patriot Damian Harris, and kind of handing the reins over to James Cook, and also, by the way, signing Latavius Murray. So Bills really remaking the room. But I think to me, the biggest story is probably the big story of the running backs across the AFC East landscape is probably what and when is Breece Hall going to come back, and how effective is he going to be when he comes back? Obviously, these ACL injuries, especially for a running back, you feel like that's something that's going to probably take a full season to get through just to get him back to where he was previous. I know the injury was fairly early in the season, but again, these injuries to running backs, we've seen freaks of nature come back and do it, like Adrian Peterson did, right? And had like his MVP season. But that to me is one of the biggest storylines of all the running back conversations this year is Breece Hall. And if him coming back really just makes that Jets running back room look really good. And I know he might not be 100% right away, but overall, like, maybe not a superstar that you can point to in the AFC East. Like, you're not pointing to like a Christian McCaffrey type, like you have, and like, you're not pointing to a Derrick Henry type, but you have a very, very solid, long list of running backs across all of these teams. And I think it makes things very interesting. So to me, the biggest X factor is Breece Hall, number one. And then number two, James Cook as a lead back for the Buffalo Bills this year. What kind of dynamic can he bring to that offense? As far as the Patriots and Dolphins, it seems like it's going to be fairly similar to what they brought to the table last year as far as their rooms are concerned, but still solid rooms. Stevenson's a good running back. Mostert and Wilson, a good combo. You mentioned Achane added to the mix as well. Maybe Pierre Strong gets some run. So very interesting landscape running backs in the division.
Yeah, I think the Jets have the best room. A lot of that is dependent, as you mentioned, on the health of Breece Hall, but then they have the third down back in Michael Carter, a high upside rookie in Israel Abanikanda, and then Bam Knight played well for them last year. So it might take the Jets a while, but I think they'll be the best room by the end of the season with just the names that they have there and with the X factor and Breece Hall there at the top. I think Ramondre Stevenson gets slept on a little bit. I think that with Bill O'Brien modernizing that offense there in New England, I think Ramondre Stevenson could be in for an uptick this season. I think he maybe has a claim for the second best running back in the AFC East. I think James Cook could come for that title with him, but you're banking more on upside with James Cook. Ramondre Stevenson has a little bit more on the resume there in New England. So to me, the Jets have the best room. I think the Patriots have the second best back, or until Breece Hall is fully healthy and proven he's fully healthy, I think they have the best back in the AFC East in Ramondre Stevenson. So then the question now comes like, what do you want? Do you like the steady Miami room with Mostert and Jeff Wilson, or do you like the high upside Buffalo Bills room with James Cook and Damian Harris outside of New England? So that's going to be sort of the question. This is a tricky one to sort of rank 1 to 4, but how would you rank these rooms 1 to 4?
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that the Jets are number 1, presuming a healthy Breece Hall. I'll give the Jets number 1. I really like the James Robinson signing. I think he kind of got a raw deal in that trade. He was obviously really solid with Jacksonville. But I don't know that I'm ready to put that New England room above the Bills and Miami quite yet until I see what kind of compliments those guys can be to Ramondre. So while I think Ramondre is one of the best backs in the division, I think the overall room isn't as good for the Patriots. I will put the Bills number 2 right now in this list. I'll put the combo of James Cook, Damian Harris, and whether it's Nyheim Hines, Latavius Murray. Like, I think it's a pretty solid room. I don't think there's a ton of missing traits when you look up and down the room as far as like stylistically. Like, the Bills have every style you could ask for in the room somewhere. So I'll put the Bills number 2. I'll put the Dolphins number 3 with Mostert and Wilson and adding A-Chain to the mix. And I'll put the Pats number 4, although I do think it's close, this collective ranking, I think, as opposed to it being like a 10-5-2. Like, I think it's pretty tight. And
within the margin
I
of
honestly,
error, for sure.
And I would listen to arguments of any ranking in any order that someone had, but that's the order I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Jets 1, Bills 2, Dolphins 3, Pats 4. Even though I do think Ramondre is probably a top 3 overall back in the division.
And RJ Melville comes with a great comment. He says, I actually think top to bottom, the Bills may have the best running back room. James Cook had almost the same yards per carry behind a worst offensive line in the NFL. I think our 2 to 4 is definitely better. I think for the Bills, you definitely have to be a fan of the upside, especially the upside of James Cook possibly getting 15, 16 targets a game, whether it's receiving or through the passing game. And I also think you have to look at it through this lens. Like, Breece Hall is going to get fed as a running back once he's healthy for the Jets. Ramondre Stevenson is going to get fed because the offense is, for the most part, who knows what you see this year with New York, but at least last year for New York and then last year for New England, like, their offense was funneled through the running game, whereas the Buffalo Bills offense and the Miami Dolphins offense is funneled through the passing game. So you have to, I think, go with more so the averages than you do the volume. But I'll agree with you in those rankings of Jets 1, Bills 2, Dolphins 3, and Patriots 4, because you're right. Like, Ramondre is kind of sticking out like a sore thumb as like the only real, like, we loved Pierre Strong Jr. last year, but didn't really see the field. He was a D2 running back, so we really got to see it from him. You're banking on that upside as well, and I think I don't think anyone would say his upside is higher than James Cook's is. And James Robinson, his knees were shot. Like, he got to New York, and they didn't even want to play him because there were concerns over his knees. So it should be really interesting to see how that all shakes out. All right, up next, we're going to tie in the tight ends and the wide receivers together, just sort of go with an all-around skill position conversation here. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills, they drafted Dalton Kincaid. They have Dawson Knox to go along with Diggs and Davis and Shakir and Hardy and Sherfield. So looking around the AFC East, the New York Jets, their top 3 receivers, Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, and Mecole Hardman. Their top tight end threats are Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzama. And then some of the auxiliary weapons for the New York Jets, while they look good on paper, Randall Cobb, Denzel Mims, and Corey Davis, I don't even know if Mims and Davis are going to be on the final Jets roster. Maybe only one of the two. I think one of those guys, at least at minimum, is bound to go. I wouldn't be surprised if both of them made their way off their roster by the end of training camp via trade. Miami obviously has Tyreek Hill. They have Jalen Waddle. They lost their slot receiver in Trent Sherfield. So they're going to go back to Cedric Wilson, who sort of underperformed last year on that big free agent contract they got. At tight end, it's really just Durham Smythe. Like, the other names that they have, like Eric Sobert Tanner Connor, Elijah Higgins, not really worth writing home about. And then some of the depth at receiver for Miami, Braxton Berrios, Chosen Anderson, Eric Izukama coming into his second year, and River Craycraft, the special teamer. And then the New England Patriots, better than last year. I will say this. Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, and Juju Smith-Schuster are the top three receivers there, with Kendrick Bourne as sort of that fourth receiver floating in. And then they added Mike Gesicki to replace Jonnu Smith to go along with Hunter Henry. So a ton of slot receivers there, and Smith-Schuster and Mike Gesicki in New England. What are your initial thoughts looking at the various different additions and skill position rooms in the AFC East?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Patriots, and it seems like a little bit of musical chairs to me, at least on the surface, right? You trade out a guy like Jacoby Myers, you bring in Juju Smith-Schuster, both slot mavens, and they're both really good at what they do. You obviously, I think, make what looks like to be an upgrade over a bust of a free agent signing with the tight end, and you bring in Gesicki instead to come in to fill in for for that with Hunter Henry. So I like that move. I think the Finns, Sherfield was a really solid player for them. We love him now, obviously, for the Bills, but I think Cedric Wilson needs to prove that he earned some dollars on that contract. Didn't do really anything at tight end. They signed Berrios, okay. And the Jets, right? I think making some moves here in bringing in Lazard and Hardman, but to your point, guys like Elijah Moore are now out of the building. Talented guys that they've put draft capital in are not going to get those snaps now. And so it's Lazard, Hardman, and Garrett Wilson, who's still obviously a big piece of that draft capital that they've invested. But I like the Jets mix of guys they have in there as well with to combo with Conklin and Uzama. Cobb, Mims, Davis, like those are bottom of the depth chart guys. And it's at least, if you're Aaron Rodgers, looking at it like guys like Cobb that you were counting on the top of the depth chart, potentially, maybe not top, but like as a key contributor in Green Bay, not so much now. So for me, I think the Pats maybe slightly upgraded, the Finns stayed steady, and the Jets, maybe stayed steady to slightly upgraded. So like overall, pretty good.
The Jets room is solid, but it's just so laughable. Like, is there really that big of a difference between Corey Davis and Alan Lazard? But you throw all that money at Alan Lazard because he's Aaron Rodgers' buddy. Like, is there really that big of a difference between Elijah Moore and Mecole Hardman? That one's a little less, I think, problematic just because of the issues that Elijah Moore posed. But those issues that Elijah Moore posed go away with a competent offensive coordinator, not that they hired a competent offensive coordinator, and a competent quarterback. So it's really crazy. Like I feel like the Jets just spent more money to bring in the same level of skill position players they had and get older at the position when they were already just fine there. So their moves are weird to me. Like their room is good, but those moves are weird. I actually kind of like the Patriots moves ish, because only for the fact that like last year there just wasn't like a pecking order and it was just a whole bunch of guys and they were just throwing things out there. At least this year, like Thornton, Parker, and Smith-Schuster are your 1, 2, 3, right? Like you're going to have Parker at the Z. You're probably going to, Parker at the X, Thornton at the Z, Smith-Schuster in the slot. And then you have Kendrick Bourne who can be inside, outside as your 4. So at least you have like some semblance of structure there for New England. But then Mike Gesicki throws it all like now. Mike Gesicki, Smith-Schuster, like I just don't. Now you have competing slot options, right? To go along with the fact that you have Hunter Henry. So they were going to use Gesicki like the Buffalo Bills plan on using Kincaid. That's all fine and well and dandy, but you're going to run 10 personnel because you also have Smith-Schuster who doesn't have a lot of boundary flex. So it's a really weird situation there in New England too. I have questions about those competing slots.
I mean, this is why I said I felt like it was musical chairs a bit, right? Because you brought in Schuster in place of Myers. You brought in Gesicki in place of Jonnu Smith, right? So, like, is the mix of this room, like, better than what they had with Jonnu Smith and Jacoby Myers with the same other players around them, like Hunter Henry and Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne. Like, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know if it's better. So it's like, it's just hard to say.
Yeah, it's two teams that have really like just played musical chairs and like gotten more expensive in doing so. And then there's the Miami Dolphins, and here's the weird thing about the Miami Dolphins, right? Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle put them number one with a bullet, right? Like when we do this ranking, they're going to be number one because they have these two speedy, absolutely X Factor type of weapons. But then after that, like Cedric Wilson underperformed, was benched for Trent Sherfield. They were running out River Craycraft. How much is Eric Izukama going to develop into year two? What if anything does Chosen Anderson have left in the tank? Braxton Berrios, I think, might actually have a career resurgence there because I think he can play really well off of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I think he could end up stepping up and being their main go-to slot guy. But then they just have no tight end weapons whatsoever. It's Durham Smythe. It's Eric Sobert. Like, do they really believe in Tanner Connor, the former wide receiver turned tight end project? Do they really believe in Elijah Higgins, the former wide receiver turned? Like, do they really believe in those guys so much? Like Mike McDaniel, the guy who let Mike Gesicki walk out the door because he didn't like that he doesn't block, now has two wide receivers turned tight ends who don't block. Like, there's just a lot of question marks too about Miami's skill position outside those two alphas.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're going to see. I mean, I'll give you my ranking right now. I think it's Miami number one, just because of those top two guys. Now, I will say this: I almost put the Bills number one because I do think the Bills, top to bottom, are the deepest skill position group from wide receivers and tight ends of the entire division. You can make the case that Diggs is a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. You could also make the case Tyreek Hill is better. Like you can rank Tyreek Hill above Diggs. You can rank Diggs above Tyreek Hill. Like, that's cool. Like, I'm willing to entertain that debate depending on, who you like and like whatever. But Waddle's clearly the best number 2 in the division, so I give them the edge. But the Bills do have legitimate depth at the skill positions with Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, now drafting Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir now in year 2, Deontay Hardy, who they signed. Like, the Bills had Sherfield from the Dolphins. The Bills have the deepest skill position group, wide receiver, tight end combination, I think, in the division. So for me, it's the Bills number 2. You could put the Bills number 1 if you wanted to, and I wouldn't really be that, argumentative about it. But I'll put Dolphins 1, Bills 2. I'm going to put the Jets number 3, and I'm going to put the Pats number 4. And I'm putting the Jets number 3 above the Pats because I really, really have a soft spot and really think Garrett Wilson is a budding star. I really love Garrett Wilson's game. We saw what he could do last year with Mike White at the helm for some of those games. The dude was an absolute stud in some of those games for the Jets. And now, complimenting him with, I know maybe we would have preferred to see Elijah Moore, or maybe not if you're a Bills fan, but Mecole Hardman is a legitimate weapon. You have also Corey Davis there in the wings, but like the top 3, right? I think of Lazard, Wilson, and Hardman is better than the Pats' top 3, just because I think Wilson's better than the Pats' top option. So Dolphins, Bills, Jets, Pats would be my order.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and that puts us through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And in our very unscientific mathematic calculations, that gives the Buffalo Bills 10 points thus far, the New York Jets 9 points thus far, the Miami Dolphins 8 points thus far, and the New England Patriots 3 points thus far. And that leads us now to the offensive line. And let's go through these units here. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills offensive line is what the offensive line is. We talked about it in the last show. The New York Jets, left to right, appear like they're probably going to be Dwayne Brown, the aging Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson. I think Joe Tippmann wins that job at center. Elijah Vera Tucker coming off of injury, and Mekhi Becton, who's lost a ton of weight, but also coming off of injury. The Miami Dolphins from left to right are Teron Armstead, Liam Eichenberg. They're still rolling Connor Williams at center, Robert Hunt at right guard, and Austin Jackson at right tackle. And then the New England Patriots left to right, Trent Brown at left tackle, Cole Strange at left guard, David Andrews at center, Michael Onwenu at right guard, and Riley Reif at right tackle. But I will say that they signed Calvin Anderson, who is one of our sleeper free agents this year, who could win a starting job either at left tackle or right tackle for that New England Patriots squad. So keep Calvin Anderson's name in mind when looking at the Patriots depth chart. But comparing these offensive line, Daves, where's your head at?
I mean, the Patriots line looks pretty solid, right? I mean, we laughed at the Cole Strange pick, but it is solid left to right. Trent Brown's been steady. Cole Strange going to man that left guard position. Andrews is very good center, and Wayu and Reif could be an interesting name. Plus, you mentioned Calvin there Calvin Anderson as a potential sneaky, maybe a sneaky guy to take a starting job. The thing that, you look at the Finns offensive line, very finesse, type offensive line. Teron Armstead, obviously the big name there. I wonder about center for them, right? With Connor Williams, not so sure about that. I think Robert Hunt is an okay player. Eichenberg, they drafted, I thought, to play tackle. He slid inside to guard. Austin Jackson hasn't necessarily lived up to his draft stock yet, but they were a decent enough pass blocking team last year. And then the Jets are interesting because left to right, if you have Dwayne Brown, Tomlinson, Tippmann, Vera Tucker, Becton, that looks pretty solid on paper. Becton thinks he's a left tackle. Dwayne Brown's only really ever played left tackle in his career. If Becton can't make that transition to right tackle, that's where I see a pretty big hole for the Jets. And so the Jets offensive line, I look at this offensive line, I feel like the Jets offensive line has the potential to be better than the Dolphins, but I can't quite put it there yet because Joe Tippmann's a rookie and we don't know what Mekhi Becton is going to be yet. So out of the three groups outside of the Bills, I actually think the Pats have the best group. I'll put the Finns slightly ahead of the Jets for now. But I will say this, the Bills to me don't have the best group here, and I don't even know if they have the second best group. And I'm wrestling with this ranking right now for offensive line. And I lost Judge. So yeah, this one's tough to rank. I don't know what you heard of mine, but I'm having a hard time figuring out where to rank the Bills in this group. I think I'm going to put the Pats number one, honestly, and you're on mute, just by the way. I'm going to put the Pats number one. It's going to be hard for me to even put the Bills number two with the question marks about Spencer Brown, but the Jets have the same question marks about right tackle. In Miami, Austin Jackson, there's question marks about him as well, and there's question marks at center for the Finns. So I'm actually going to put the Bills number two in my ranking. I'm going to put the Jets number three and the Dolphins number four. And it might be a surprise to some people, but I'm going to go Pats, Bills, Jets, Dolphins as my order. And it looks like James might actually agree with me here on this one.
Yeah, I was making this comment on social media. I feel like the AFC East could come down to the right tackle position of some of these football teams, right? Because if you look at the Bills, you have the young right tackle in Spencer Brown. The Jets, they have the young right tackle in Mekhi Becton. The Finns, they have the young right tackle in Austin Jackson. All three of these guys have had injury concerns. They've underwhelmed a little bit on the field. So they were all rather generally high draft picks. So the AFC East could come down, at least the offensive line, come down to who steps up at right tackle. I struggle with the Patriots. I think for what the Patriots do, their offensive line is really solid. But like Trenton Brown struggled last year at left tackle. Riley Reif, who knows what he still has left in the tank. Not a lot of depth there. Miami, I think that it's like a four-way tie almost. Like it's just
I know
it's a four-way tie. It's a four-way tie of like mediocre. I almost want to give like the Jets the advantage just because of like Tomlinson, Tippmann, Vera Tucker. But man, you could make the argument the Bills are the best offensive line in the AFC East.
You could, yeah, you could.
You really could. This is one of those ones where it's got to play out on the field. So you had them ranked Patriots first, Bills second,
and Jets, then Dolphins. Yeah.
All right. We'll roll with that since I don't even think I can wrap my head around.
I mean, I figured that out on the fly. Like I had no idea how to rank these. It was like
it's a very unscientific poll, especially when it comes to the line. All right, let's transition now from the trenches on offense to the trenches on defense, and let's take a look at the defensive lines in the AFC East. And this is where I think the Buffalo Bills take a back seat to some of these other teams. Obviously, the Bills added Poona Ford in recent weeks, but the rest of the defensive line is pretty much just returning from last year. But you look at the Jets, their edge rushers, Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson, and Will McDonald. Those are, I think, their top 4 edge rushers. All high draft picks, high performing players, etc. There are 2 sort of flex edges that they have in Bryce Huff, who I think is also a pretty good pass rusher. He's the guy who injured Josh Allen last year. Knock on wood. Hopefully he doesn't do that again. And then your guy from a couple of drafts ago, Michael Clemens, who can maybe go inside, outside, play a little bit of 3 tech, because if you are to look at one position on their defensive line that's weak, it's probably 3 tech. Because if you look at the Jets interior, Quinnen Williams and Al Woods are really good pluggers. Quinnen Williams is obviously one of the best defensive tackles in football. Both of those guys sort of work the 1 tech. And then the 3 tech is former Bill Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, and then it's probably John Franklin Myers and Michael Clemens kicking inside on passing downs next to guys like Quinnen Williams, or Al Woods at 1 tech and Quinnen Williams at 3 tech. So a lot of options, but a very talented Jets defensive line. The Finns, they have Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Andrew Van Ginkel rushing the passer. And then along the defensive line, they have Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, Raekwon Davis, and Emmanuel Agba coming off of injury. And then last but not least, the Patriots. They have 2 pretty good edge rushers, Matthew Judon and Josh Uche. Uche's come on late last couple of seasons. Their depth isn't so great. Anthony Jennings, Ronnie Perkins. And then their defensive line has just always been solid. Lawrence Guy, Devin Godshaw, Christian Barmore, Dietrich Wise, and now they add Keon White to that mix. So the Bills might have the 4th best defensive line in the AFC East.
I mean, I think without Von Miller, yes, it's the 4th best. I mean, and this is not, I'm not like, I've been pretty pro Bills obviously tonight, but like without Von Miller, and without the Bills really making any investments in the draft to the defensive line, I know they signed Poona Ford, which was great, right? I get that, right? But they really didn't make a ton of investment in the defensive line through the draft or free agency outside of Poona Ford. So, you have to say without Von Miller there, that group doesn't quite have the shine that it would. And now I know I've said the same thing earlier about Breece Hall and the running backs for the Jets. So like, how much do I factor in Von Miller being there as part of my rankings? Hard to say, right?
I say we factor him into the equation just because I think by midseason he'll be part of the equation. And you even have Brandon Beane saying, like, this guy's a freak. He might be ready week 1. So let's say, for the sake of the argument, we have Von Miller at our disposal. How would you rank AFC East defensive lines 1 to 4?
Yeah. I think the Jets are number 1 for me, just given the depth, given the investments made. Jermaine Johnson last year in the 1st round, Will McDonald, former 1st rounder Solomon Thomas. They have Quinnen Williams, who's an absolute stud. Their complementary pieces are good, and John Franklin Myers, Carl Lawson on the edge, and they're deep. I think the Jets' defensive line is the best in the division. From a depth perspective, if Von Miller's there, I think the Bills have the potential to be the 2nd best defensive line. And I go back to kind of training camp last year and all the positive reports we were hearing, and then into the season last year when Von was there, that Bills defensive front was really nasty. I mean, they were good. And now you add Poona Ford to that mix, and really it's kind of ultimately the same group that you had a year ago with the addition of Poona Ford. I think the Bills have the potential to be the 2nd best. I'll say, this is tough. I think I'll say the Patriots 3rd and Dolphins 4th. And I say that just because I think the Patriots depth is really good. They still have Matthew Judon. They had the 3rd most sacks in the NFL last year with 54. I mean, Eagles were far and away the highest with 70. The second most was Kansas City with 55, and the Patriots were there with 54. So like, Philadelphia being an anomaly, the Patriots are right there at the top of the league in sacks. So I'll give them that edge, especially with Keon White being now added to the mix. And I'll just say the Dolphins 4, because although I do really love Jalen Phillips, and obviously I love Bradley Chubb, an NC State guy, I just don't know that the depth is there for the Dolphins for me to put them higher. Although what this exercise is really showing on as far as the defensive lines, this division has some good defensive lines.
What this is showing me so far too is that the margin of error, like almost every single position group, is so thin. Like one injury here, one injury there, one player breaks out here, one player breaks out there. Like it's just, other than quarterback, and that's probably going to be my biggest takeaway from this at the end of this. Other than quarterback, the margin of error is so razor thin at most of these position groups outside, like I mentioned, of quarterback. And that's kudos to Brandon Beane, because outside of to have these guys don't have, stumbling all over my words here, these guys don't pay quarterbacks that much money. The Jets do now, but like these guys all have like quarterbacks on rookie contracts, things like that. And they're allowed to accumulate other talented football players. The Jets have had just a plethora of top 10 picks because they've been so bad. The Bills, for them to still be in line with those other three teams within the margin of error at all these position groups, is quite impressive, seeing as they are now paying Josh Allen a significant amount of money. All right, on to the linebackers now. The Buffalo Bills, other than Matt Milano, who's an all-pro, like Lord knows what they're doing in the linebacking room heading into the season. Be any number of directions, but this is probably the worst position group of any team in the AFC East. So the Buffalo Bills are not alone, and the Buffalo Bills are the only team really with an all-pro. The Jets have CJ Mosley, who's very good, Quincy Williams, who's serviceable, but then when they have to bring out a third linebacker, or if one of those two guys gets hurt, it's like Jamie Sherwood, Nasidrline, Chaz Surratt, Barnes, who they just drafted, like not the most talented group of players, a lot of safety tweeners. The Dolphins might have the best group of the bunch. David Long was a wicked underrated signing this offseason. Jerome Baker's a pretty good linebacker. They got Duke Riley and Channing Tindall as depth. And then the Patriots, Jawan Bentley, very, very good football player. But then behind him, it's Tavai, Mac Wilson, Raekwon McMillan. Not exactly a lot to write home about, but Jabril Peppers, Kyle Duggar, Marty Mapu, a lot of those safety tweeners who get a lot of those snaps. So I think you might have to like factor them a little bit into that linebacker equation. What are your thoughts on the linebacking core in the AFC East?
I mean, this is one where, we like to say we're an objective show, right? We are pretty objective when it comes to the Bills. And I'm going to be objective here and say the Bills have the worst linebacking core of the division. I think I'm ranking them fourth. Milano's an all-pro. I get that, but so many question marks around what are the Bills going to do schematically this year differently to make up for the loss of Tremaine Edmonds? Are they going to change a ton schematically? We expect there to be some changes with Sean McDermott changing styles, but Eric, he studied the tape and he sees that even if the Bills want to go to a speedier kind of group, like they're still going to be putting a ton of stress on the linebackers in this defense. And I don't love that for the Bills' chances outside of Matt Milano with a bunch of young, unproven guys in the room. Now, there's talent there, but it's unproven. So for me, I'm going to have to put the Bills number 4. Number 3, I will put the Pats only because I do like Jawan Bentley, but I feel like their depth is pretty thin and also not sure what roles some of these guys are going to have. You mentioned Mapu, like, is he going to be a hybrid linebacker? Is Duggar going to kind of like, what are they going to do? Right. Bentley's the only guy that kind of really stands out. You have Mac Wilson there, obviously, who they drafted. And then, I mean, the Jets probably come up number 2 with Mosley and Quincy Williams there. I think Mosley, when healthy, is still a very, very solid linebacker. They have some talent back there with the Sidral Dean, Chaz Surratt from Carolina, who we liked in the draft process, Jamian Sherwood, who's a thumper kind of hybrid guy, kind of along the lines of a Mapu or a Duggar as well. But Mosley and Quincy Williams pretty solid, and I do think the Finns probably have the best top to bottom group with David Long, Baker, Channing Tindall, and Riley. And it pains me to say that because this is a group for the Finns that really doesn't get a ton of press necessarily when they had guys like Landon Roberts as well, but like pretty solid. And I will say this, I think that of the overall position groups across the entire division, linebacker might be the weakest power ranked position group for the division as a whole. So that'll be my rankings. Bills 4. I'll put Bills 4, Pats 3, Jets 2, Dolphins 1.
And again, if this like sort of, show has sort of like shown anything really or illustrate anything, I think it also shows like, in the NFL, the modern NFL, there's a reason why linebacker is no longer really a premium position, because I think the argument could be made that whatever team's defensive line and secondary plays the best is what's going to end up having the best linebacking group, because like they'll be sort of dependent. I was tempted to put the Bills number 1, to be completely honest with you, because when all this, and this is what it gets to, because at the end of the day, the Bills are the only team with an all-pro, a recent all-pro in Matt Milano. Matt Milano's the best linebacker by a mile in the AFC East. No one's close. Now you look at the Jets, you have Quincy Williams, who could be like has been a nice niche player for them. CJ Mosley, like when is he going to hit that cliff? When's he going to fall off? I don't disagree with you having the Miami Dolphins number 1, because I think in terms of depth wise, they have the deepest linebacking core. David Long got paid for a reason. Jerome Baker is a solid linebacker. And then the Pats, Jawan Bentley is one of the better linebackers. Maybe he has the argument to be the second best linebacker in the division behind Matt Milano. And so, but then they just have a bunch of just meh after that. So it's a struggle. It's weird. We'll go with yours here. We'll go with your rankings here, at least for our point system. But again, like margin of error between all 4 of these teams is just absolutely razor thin at every position group at quarterback thus far.
I had the Bills 4. If Tremain's still there, they're number 1, right? So it's like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's tough. It's tough.
And if they drafted like Janet Campbell in the first round, you probably would have put him number 1 too, right? Like,
yeah, I definitely would.
Not that they had a chance to get Jack Campbell, but
thank you, Dan Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Dan Campbell. Looking at the secondary now, the Bills obviously have Trey White, 2 years removed from an ACL, Kyrie Elam, Christian Benford, Teron Johnson. They bring back Hyde and Poyer, Hyde coming off that injury. They added Taylor Rapp. The Buffalo Bills, we talked about it last week. Our confidence is through the roof because we think Elam is going to meet his potential this year. We like Benford, and we think Trey White will be even better 2 years removed from that ACL. But then you look around the AFC East at some of the other secondaries as well. And this is another loaded class, and it's a margin of error is so thin. The Jets, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, 2 great boundary corners and a great slot corner. They added Chuck Clark to go along with Jordan Whitehead at safety. That's a really good secondary right there. The Dolphins, he struggled last year with injuries. Who knows what he still got left in the tank? But Xavier Howard goes along with Jalen Ramsey. I think they get a really physical slot guy. I think Cam Smith slots in there right away. Cam Smith in the slot. If not, they have Kadar Kahu, who played really well last year, and Nick Needham. And then at safety, they have Brandon Jones, Javon Holland, maybe Deshaun Elliott works in there as well. So a lot of star power in that Finn secondary, but maybe some holes that you can poke. Inexperience at nickel, Xavier Howard coming off injury, the strong safety position with Eric Rowe gone. And then the Patriots got Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones on the boundary. They have Marcus Jones, Miles Bryant in the slot, and then Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, Adrian Phillips, and then Jalen Mills making the transition to safety. And they also have Jack Jones sitting there, who played well his rookie year as well. So again, just a stacked position group all throughout the AFC East.
If Trey White, a year removed, is back to his old self, and Kyrie Elam takes a step up with Taron Johnson in the nickel and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer healthy, and hopefully the Bills coaching staff sort of monitoring that over the summer. Not look, I don't even care if they practice all that much in training camp, to be honest. I want them ready for week one. And we've kind of done this all night, presuming health. I think if Trey White's back to form and all these guys are healthy and Kyrie Irving takes a step up, I think the Bills are number one, if number one secondary. And the reason I say that is because of those reasons, Taron Johnson in the nickel, and then the depth of Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, Alex Austin, who you've drafted. Not sure if he'll make the team or not. That's fine. You signed Taylor Rapp as well. Maybe DeMar's even back. Like you are deep in the secondary if you're the Bills. And I really love that the narrative about this secondary has taken a turn for the positive versus what it was like a year ago at this time, where we weren't sure if the Bills were going to draft a corner. We're fairly certain they would. But look at the dividends we got from a guy like Christian Benford, and the fact that the Bills were able to bring Dane Jackson back into the mix after he was a RFA. So top to bottom, if those things play out, I do think the Bills have the most talented and deepest secondary, top to bottom, but the Jets are right there. And the Jets are right there because they might have the best player overall in the division in the secondary in Sauce Gardner. And they have solid safeties as well. But their boundary corners are really, really studly. And the only reason I put them slightly below the Bills is just because of the overall secondary. We're ranking it together, not corners and safeties separately. So I'm putting the Jets number 2. This is going to surprise some people, I'm sure. But I'm actually going to go ahead and put the Dolphins number 3 with the addition of Jalen Ramsey. I know
it's Javon Holland, it's Jalen Ramsey, and then it's a bunch of question marks.
Yep,
The names
I know.
are there, but it's
I
a
know.
bunch of question marks.
It's a bunch of
And
question marks.
That's why I'm with you. I support that.
But Cam Smith as a draft pick, like, could end up being something, right?
Yeah.
And like so, and the Patriots, look, they very like. I'd be again willing to hear the argument that maybe the Patriots should be number 1. The Jets, I'm putting number 2. I could hear the argument for them being number 1, but I'm putting the Patriots number 4. They have a different style than really. They're kind of an opposite style of defense as the Bills when it comes to the back end, but they got Christian Gonzalez in the draft. It's solid. Why I put the Patriots number 4 is the safeties, right? And the safeties are where I see. I'm not sure where the Patriots kind of strategy is and what their future is for their safety position. It's pretty clear that they're fairly set on their corners, but again, where has been the weakness for the Patriots in the secondary of recent? It's been in their nickel corner with guys like Miles Bryant. Those areas of their second have been exposed in years past. And so, they're going to move Jonathan Jones into the nickel. They did that a little bit last year. They have Jack Jones on one side. I just don't know between Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, Jabril Peppers, like, what are they going to do at the safety position? So that, to me, the Patriots have more question marks just overall. And so that's why I ranked them 4th. So I got Bills, Jets, Dolphins, Pats as my rankings.
Interesting. I went a little different than you. I went Jets number 1 just because I think that that's a really good 5 right there. Sauce, Reed, Carter, Clark, and Whitehead. But I'm willing to stipulate to what you stipulated to. Like, the depth for the Bills, I think, is better than the depth of the Jets. I mean, one guy gets hurt, they're starting Bryce Hall. Another guy gets hurt, they're starting Brandon Eccles. They've got Ashton Davis, who's sort of underwhelmed as a second-round pick. So their depth is certainly not where the Buffalo Bills' depth is in the secondary. I echo 100% what you said about the Finns. What does Howard have left in the tank? Ramsey, it's Holland, and then it's just a bunch of sort of question marks. I know Kahu played well for them as well. And then the Patriots, right? It's, again, more question marks. How do they survive without Devin McCourty, who's retired? Can Duggar, Peppers, Phillips, Mills, can one of those guys center field the way McCourty did? Does Christian Gonzalez take his lumps as a rookie? Who is the nickel? Is it Miles Bryant? Is it Marcus Jones? Like, there's a bunch of different question marks there for the Patriots. So we'll roll with yours. Bills get 4 points here. Jets get 3 points. Finns get 2 points. And the Patriots get 1 point in this sort of thought experiment here. And that leads us now to special teams, which I think the Bills are the winner here. The Bills have
I
Bass,
agree.
Sam Martin, Ferguson. Then it gets interesting. 3 solid units than the Patriots, right? Greg Zuerlein, Thomas Morstead, those veterans who just sort of have stuck around this league forever and always just play solid. They've got Mecole Hardman and Bam Knight in the return game. The Finns, Sanders, who was really good 2 years ago, kind of came back down to earth last year. Jake Bailey, who was really good his rookie year, then fell out of favor in New England. Now he's in Miami. They've got Braxton Berrios, Mostert, Hill, Waddle, all as return options. And then the Patriots, who might have a rookie in Ryland, who they used a 4th-round pick on. So probably bye-bye Nick Folk. And then a rookie in Berringer at punter to go along with a really good return man in Marcus Jones. So Bills number 1, but then where do you go from here in the AFC East in terms of like, and we're not even talking about the nuances of special teams like the Gunners and all those things. Like definitely we're leaving some meat on the bone here. We're just talking about the specialists on special teams, but what are your thoughts on those units?
I'm going to put the Finns number 2. I think Sanders had a nice bounce back season last year after a up and down 2021. Jake Bailey, serviceable. I think them getting Berrios to add to the return game gives them a ton of options between him, Mostert, and Hill and Waddle if they choose to do that. So I'll give the Finns the number 2 spot here. I will give the Jets the number 3 spot with Zuerlein, Morstead, Hardman, and Knight. I like that. I like their returners in Hardman and Knight. Morstead's a good punter. Zuerlein was a bit hit or miss last year. He's bounced around with a few different teams over the last couple years between the Rams, Cowboys, now the Jets. But, he's still got plenty of leg. And, if given the opportunity, he can still make some big kicks. The accuracy has kind of drifted away from him a bit, but still solid and a decent kicker. The Jets had kind of struggled to land on a kicker for the last couple years, and they finally seem to have gotten one. The Pats really love the return guys there, Marcus Jones and Pierre Strong. The question is going to be their kicker and punter, right? Like clearly they're going with a rookie punter, but is Ryland going to beat out Nick Folk for that job for place kicking duties? Nick Folk has been a pretty reliable kicker for them for the last couple of years, but with that competition and likely maybe the rookie winning that out, I can't in good conscience put that kicking game ahead of the others like Sanders and Zuerlein, especially Tyler Bass. So for me, it would go Bills, Finns, Jets, Pats in that order for special teams.
Yeah, I'm with you. I sort of had Jets number 2 just because I like their veterans there, more proven guy in Morstead than Jake Bailey. But I'm willing to, again, see that one to you because I think you made some good points there. And then, again, the Patriots, like Marcus Jones, electric return man. And who knows? Because rookies are a question mark. Who knows? Ryland could come out and have a Tyler Bass type rookie year, right? Like Behringer could come out and have a Ryan Stonehouse type of rookie year, and all of a sudden it's the Patriots who are number 1. So very special teams is a very, very fickle thing, but the Bills have a solid unit. The Bills have a above average unit, and the rest of the AFC East on paper has either a solid or, in the case of the Patriots, question mark unit. So if you're the Bills and you get into a tight game, I think you feel confident with your team's units, especially compared to some of the other teams in the league. I mean, the Miami Dolphins, they have Danny Crossman working against them. The Patriots special teams was not great last year outside of kickers and punters, just in terms of fielding kicks, fielding punts, tackling on special teams, etc. They added some special team specific players in free agency to sort of address that. So, but the Jets have a solid unit, and they have had a solid unit under Brant Boyer. And speaking of Danny Crossman, speaking of Brant Boyer, into the final sort of comparison of the night, and the players are one thing, but the players need to be coached up, and there needs to be schemes that go along with this. So we're going to compare the coaching staffs in the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills, their head coach is Sean McDermott. Their defensive mastermind is Sean McDermott. And their offensive mastermind is Ken Dorsey. And I would say like there's some Aaron Kromer influence, some Mike Shula influence, some Joe Brady influence. But for the most part, it's McDermott, it's Dorsey, and it's special teams coach Matt Smiley. Like those, it's a team effort in Buffalo for sure. I'm not trying to undersell any of those other coaches, but at the end of the day, it's Sean McDermott's name on that defense. It's Ken Dorsey's name on that offense. It's Matthew Smiley's name on that special teams. The Jets, Robert Saleh is the head coach. On offense, Nathaniel Hackett is their offensive coordinator. Also, the Buffalo connections. Todd Downing was hired as their passing game coordinator. So that's sort of the two guys putting the stamp on the offense for the New York Jets. Their defense is led by Jeff Ulbrich, but again, it's Robert Saleh's defense, and their special teams led by Brant Boyer. The Miami Dolphins, that offense is Mike McDaniel's offense, plain and simple. Like Darrell Bevel's there. Frank Smith is the offensive coordinator, but that's Mike McDaniel's offense. And then their defense is now masterminded by Vic Fangio, their special teams, Danny Crossman, and then the Patriots. Pretty much it's all just Bill Belichick's brainchild. Like we've already established that, but Bill O'Brien brings an adult in the room to offense. You have Gerard Mayo and Steve Belichick chiming in on defense. And then I'm surprised Joe Judge wasn't made the special teams coordinator because their special teams was so bad last year, but Cameron Acorn still has a job there as a special teams coordinator in New England. Dude, Bill Belichick is the head coach of the New England Patriots, and I think I might have them 4. No, I don't. I think I definitely don't have them 1 or 2.
This is tough because I'm trying not to let my personal opinions of the personalities of some of the coaches affect how I'm ranking them. Like Mike McDaniel just like really irks me. Like they're my
number 1.
I can't stand Mike McDaniel, but I think they have to be number 1 just because of Vic Fangio.
Oh, I think I lost Dave there. Either that or Dave lost me. In the comment section, if you can let us know. Is it just me or is it just Dave right now? In the comment section, let us know. But
so
oh, sorry, you sort of phased out there.
Oh, okay.
I said that whole point.
I said I'll put the Bills number 2. I don't think I could possibly put Belichick 4th, so I'll put the Pats 3 and I'll put the Jets 4. And that's not an indictment on Robert Saleh, by the way. Obviously, Nate Hackett, like that's not inspiring to me. That seems like an Aaron Rodgers placating type move. I really like Robert Saleh. I think that ultimately he could be like the next generation's Belichick type of guy as far as like defensive mastermind. But I
can't overcome that offensive coordinator.
I can't. And now with Bill O'Brien back with Belichick, I think I'm going to give the Pats the benefit of the doubt there, and I'll put the Pats. I'll put the Pats ahead of the Jets. So I'll go Fins, Bills, Pats, Jets in that order for coaching.
Yeah, I had it Fins, Bills, Pats, Jets as well. Miami, listen, again, he might rub you the wrong way, but Mike McDaniel is the best offensive mind in the AFC East. And in today's NFL, offense wins you games. And then on top of that, you have that buffer, that safety blanket of Vic Fangio as your defensive coordinator with a talented defense. So even though you
I would
might
be interested, right? Like the division has 3 defensive-minded head coaches and 1 offensive-minded. Is that might be the only division where that's the case, where it's that ratio. I don't know off the top of my head, but like that seems
AFC South, Vrabel. Oh no, Arthur Smith. Never mind. And then Steichen, but yeah, it's definitely peculiar. It's definitely different. The Jets, like, listen, I don't understand how Nathaniel Hackett consistently gets a job as an offensive coordinator in the National Football League. What has he ever done? Right? He was the definition of mediocre when he was in Buffalo. He wasn't qualified for the job when he was hired as an offensive coordinator in Buffalo. Buffalo just couldn't find a guy who wanted to work for Doug Marrone. Nathaniel Hackett was his choice. He came from Syracuse. He was mediocre. You know, he had one good year in Jacksonville where they made the AFC South or the AFC Championship game. But then since then, he's just been awful. He rode Aaron Rodgers' coattails. He rode Matt LaFleur's coattails. He went to Denver. He puked all over himself. I mean, what has Nathaniel Hackett done in this league to keep deserving these chances at offensive coordinator other than apparently making Aaron Rodgers laugh? Because that's why Aaron Rodgers likes him. He makes him laugh. So, and you could tell Nathaniel Hackett's going through it right now when you saw him on draft day with that goatee. Like, he's going through some stuff, man. He's going through some things.
You don't willingly like that. That's a man who lost a bet of some kind.
And then you have Todd Downing, who puked all over himself in Oakland, who puked all over himself in Tennessee. a guy who was an up and coming coach when he was in Buffalo and has puked all over himself since he's left Buffalo. So Todd Downing is the other sort of like adult in the room with Nathaniel Hackett. So like the two adults in the room are just jokes. And Robert Saleh he's a great defensive coach, and Jeff Ulbrich is a great defensive coach, and Brant Boyer is a great special teams coordinator, and they have a great roster. But those two clown shows are running your offense in the year 2023. So like you can't have the Jets anything higher than number 4, because at the end of the day, you still have Bill Belichick, who can still be a defensive mastermind, and you have an adult in the room on offense now in Bill O'Brien. So at the end of the day, I think the Patriots, like you said, usurp the Jets in that regard. So, all right, looking at the scorecard here, when all is said and done, the Bills finished with 27, the Jets finished with 24 points in our very official scorecard here. The Dolphins finished with 23 points, and the Patriots finished with 15 points. So Bills 24, Jets 20, or I'm sorry, excuse me, Bills 27, Jets 24, Fins 23, Patriots 15. I'm honestly surprised because, like I said, we weren't scaling or calibrating the position groups. We weren't counting for margin of error or anything like that. I'm honestly surprised the Bills won because I think you could make the argument on paper the Jets, outside of quarterback, have the better roster.
I will say this though, as unscientific as it was, I do think it largely aligns with probably the consensus feeling that the Bills are still the best team overall, and Josh Allen obviously has a lot to do with that, and that the Jets and Dolphins are right there, and you could make the case for either one. And you saw, like, with our results, they were only 1 point different and only a few points behind the Bills, and then the Patriots kind of, a distant fourth, but still getting some points in some areas. So, like, I don't know, like, I know it wasn't like super scientific, but it kind of feels right, like, in a way.
So that brings us to the last thing here. Like, how are we power ranking these teams? Because me personally, I think the Jets on paper are better than the Dolphins. And obviously a lot of, and I'm torn right now too, because a lot of it depends on Tua's health. But Nathaniel Hackett, 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, question marks at the 2 tackle positions. Like, I'm almost like willing to think the Fins could finish with a better record than the Jets. The Jets are better on paper.
I think that the combination of the up-and-coming offensive mind of Mike McDaniel paired with the steady track record of success as a defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio is a really, really good pairing for Miami and their personnel and what they have on both offense and defense. I think you give the benefit of the doubt for now to Miami. They were a playoff team a year ago. They had, injuries to Tua obviously as well. They have really a top heavy weapons room with Tua and Waddle, or with Tyreek and Waddle. But their defense is also pretty solid. And with Vic man, that's tough for me. I think it's a toss. I'll go with whatever you want. I think it's Bills 1, Pats 4. Whoever you want to put 2, I'm cool with it. Like, whatever you want. You took my rankings like all night. Yeah. So why don't you decide the overall?
It's tough because, like I said, it's so dependent on Tua's health. I have higher hopes for Mekhi Becton than Austin Jackson. I just feel like even though they're good on paper, I don't think the Jets are going to deliver in reality. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I'll go Fins 2, Jets 3, Pats 4. Because I think when it all shakes out in reality, I think it's going to be the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins towards the top of the division again, with the New York Jets. It's weird, right? Because only one of these teams might make the playoffs this year too, with how tough the schedule is for all these teams too. Like, it just might be whoever wins the AFC East is the only AFC East representative. That's how crazy it might be this year with how gauntlet is the schedule for all of these teams. So it's wild to think that, because I think all 3 of these are playoff caliber football teams, the Bills, the Jets, and the Dolphins. But man, it's just going to be tough, right? Like, it's going to be it's going to be really interesting, and there's going to be a lot of anxiety this season.
It'll be
I think,
tense.
for the
Yeah,
Buffalo
I
Bills.
think it's going to be really tense.
Yeah, it's I mean, if you look at the Bills schedule, and we're going to break down, we're going to talk about the Bengals next week. We're going to talk about the Chiefs next week. Two teams that we have to play on the road again next season, even though we played them on the road again last year. It always seems to happen that way. But I mean, the Bills have to play the AFC West, right? We got to play the Raiders and the Broncos, who are not walkover teams, but they're not great teams either.
Yep.
But then we obviously have to play the Chiefs and the Chargers. We have to play the NFC North, Cowboys, Giants, Commanders, Eagles. Eagles are going to be tough. Cowboys are going to be tough. Giants are going to be tough.
NFC East, right?
Yeah, NFC East. I think I might have said North there by accident. We got the Bucks. We got the Jags. We got the Bengals. So it's a tough schedule. It is a tough schedule. And the entire AFC East has a tough schedule this year, having to play the NFC East and the AFC West. So it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be super tense.
It's going to be super tense. And there's with that schedule, right? You could have, like you said, maybe only one team from the AFC East making the playoffs with like maybe 11 to 12 wins potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll get to all that, but we're going to beat up on, AFC East and AFC West, maybe the two best divisions. I mean, definitely the two best divisions in the AFC, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think. I mean, maybe you could make a case for the AFC North, but probably not, just because it seems like the Bengals are kind of far and above the best team now in that division. But like the AFC West and AFC East going to beat up on each other in the regular season this year.
Yeah. All right, Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
I mean, I think this is a good exercise, right? Because you really try to be objective and you really try to see where you really feel like you stack up against these teams. And these teams made improvements, right? I mean, like whatever about the Patriots, like they kind of feel like they're the same team again this year that they were last year. But I do think it's fair to say that the Jets definitely got better. Miami with Tua healthy potentially all season. Again, Mike McDaniel, another year as a head coach with experience under his belt. Like it's going to be tough. And I think objectively we do this exercise and see like the Bills are there, right? They're the champs, but like it's close. It's closer than maybe it has been since they really went on this run to kind of be the champs. So
yeah, it's gonna be stressful. I personally, I've gone from very pessimistic at the start of this offseason to I'm pretty optimistic now. I think the additions that we made on offense, I think our offensive line is better. The Osiris Torrance addition alone just gets me super pumped along the offensive line and his ability to anchor and pass protect and what he can possibly do for the run game. I'm excited to see James Cook as a versatile bell cow back in a pass first offense and getting him 15, 16 targets a game, both through rushing the football and through pass catching. And then you add guys like Deontay Hardy and Dalton Kincaid and Trent Sherfield to this passing game. They add different layers, different elements. They take some pressure off of Stephon Diggs. And then on defense, Leslie Frazier is gone. And he was somebody who anyone who watches this show knows that like I had respect for Leslie Frazier, but I've wanted him gone for 2 years now. I did not like his style of defense. I did not think it was aggressive enough. I did not think they changed fronts enough and did things to confuse offenses. The offense knew exactly what they were looking at pre-snap, even though it would change post-snap. So I'm excited. I think the Buffalo Bills have probably the best roster they could have had heading into the season without going all in and making like a crazy cap decision and chasing a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. So the Bills have the best team in the AFC East. The Bills have the best quarterback in the AFC East. The Bills have one of the best coaching staffs in the AFC East, or a solid coaching staff. So it's all about going out there, staying healthy and executing now at this point. And those new wrinkles need to keep you atop the AFC East. And then we're going to talk about it next week. They've got to win you more than one playoff game. The Bills got to win more than one playoff game this year.
And the Bills have to be healthier this year than they were last year. Last year was the law of averages playing out after a couple years of really good luck on the injury front. Last year, kind of all came crashing down to key players throughout the season. So hopefully it swings back the other way a bit in 2023 and then wish them better health as well will go a long way for that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back next week, and barring any breaking Bills news, we will be doing sort of what we did tonight, maybe a little bit different stylistically, but essentially what we're going to be doing is just breaking down the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. So we broke down our division opponents this week. Next week, we're going to break down the two biggest giants that have stood between us and a chance at the Lombardi Trophy over the past couple of seasons. So look forward to seeing you guys next week, and until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!